Hello, and welcome back to Random Talk with NG. If this is your first time here, you're welcome. And if you've been here for a while, whether from the very beginning or you stumbled in somewhere along the way, thank you for staying. Today is not just another episode, it is a marker, a reminder, a quiet celebration. Today's episode is a little special to me because Random Talk with NG turns 3 on the 31st of December. And if you're listening to this, I just want to say we're still here. Not perfect, not always consistent, but present, growing, learning. 3 years of conversations, 3 years of showing up, sometimes confidently, sometimes quietly, sometimes unsure, but still showing up. And I didn't want to end the year with noise. I wanted to end it with reflection. Because success is not about never falling. It's about refusing to stay down when you do. And if there's one thing I've learned after 3 years of podcasting, it's this. Your voice matters, even when it shakes. Even when life gets messy. Even when the episodes don't come out every week. Even when it feels like no one is listening. So today, I am not teaching, I am not interviewing, I am just talking. Because here is the truth. This podcast grew me before it even grew an audience. When I started Random Talk with NG, I didn't have it all figured out. I wasn't trying to go viral. I wasn't chasing perfection. I just had thoughts, stories, questions, and a tiny nudge in my spirit that said, speak. I didn't have a master plan. I just knew I liked meaningful conversations, the kind that makes you pause, think, and maybe live a little differently after. I was tired of always coming online to see the trends of, oh, the boy said this, the man said this, relationship matters here and there. But what I didn't know was how much showing up would test me. There were moments I was consistent, moments I disappeared, moments I recorded and never posted. And there were moments I asked myself quietly, does this even matter? Who sent me message? But one of the biggest lessons this 3 years taught me is this. You don't always need clarity to continue. Sometimes you just need honesty. I've recorded episodes while I was tired, episodes that came after long work days, episodes that were late, messy, or didn't even make it out, but somehow I kept returning. Mary Ann Radmacher once said, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. There were times I felt like stopping, but then I would get messages from one of you saying, this episode was for me, or oh, I really needed to hear this today, thank you. Those moments kept me going. And if I've ever said anything that made you pause, reflect, or breathe deeper, thank you for letting me be part of that moment. I showed up on days I felt inspired, and I showed up on days I felt empty, and both counted. Being still here doesn't mean I never doubted. It means I didn't let doubt have the final say. And I think that's something many of us need to hear, especially at the end of a year. Consistency is not loud. Consistency is not loud. Sometimes it's just stubborn hope. One of my most personal lessons this past years, that progress beats perfection every single time. If you've been listening for a while, you might remember my episode on planning. I think it was my very second episode. I had this deep realization that we don't fail because we're not capable. We often just expect ourselves to leap when life is really built in layers. And then there was the episode on people pleasing, the cost of being nice. That one was raw. Because saying yes too often nearly made me forget who I was. But in speaking about it, I began reclaiming space for myself too. And this is my own quote, start before you are ready, speak before you feel polished, and heal while you are still hurting. So this podcast has not just been a gift to others, it's been a mirror for me because I've grown while speaking, I've healed while recording, and I've learned to give myself grace. I've also been able to share my knowledge on podcasting with those who wish to start podcasts. And I am happy to see that, yes, a couple of people have been able to use my guidance to also begin their own podcast, and it's also great to see that they are doing well. Going back to the comments I made earlier on progress beating perfection every time, one thing I've also learned clearly through this podcast is that perfection is a terrible starting point. If I had waited until everything was neat, aligned, and impressive, Random Talk with Angie would still be an idea in my notes app. I remember that when I started my very first episode when I recorded my very first episode on Random Talk with Angie, I was really scared to put it out, and that episode on gratitude is still one of my absolute favorites because I was amazed at the number of things that I paused to think about, with regards to gratitude and things to be grateful for. And some episodes were simple, some were raw, some were better than others, but every single one was honest. I've talked about anger as well, not as a theory, but as something I had to confront within myself. I talked about planning because I needed structure in seasons that felt chaotic. And I talked about rest because I was tired of glorifying burnout. I've talked about being present because I was, my mind was often everywhere except where my feet were. And what I realized is this: sometimes you teach what you're still learning, and that is perfectly okay, because progress does not announce itself. It happens quietly, episode by episode, lesson by lesson. And learning in public isn't always comfortable, but it's freeing. So if I were starting Random Talk with Angie today again from scratch, here's what I would do differently. I would stop comparing my voice to others. My goodness, I would give myself permission to rest, not quit. I would stop doubting the power of small beginnings. I would stop overthinking platforms and just start showing up where I can. And I'll start messy, I'll start small, I'll start scared, but I'll just start. I'll tell myself that growth is not linear and that comparison is a distraction disguised as motivation. I would remind myself that my voice doesn't become valuable because people applaud it, but because it's honest. And here's what I wouldn't change: the honesty, the gentleness, the heart behind every episode. Because even when all I had was WhatsApp broadcasts, those early episodes still mattered. They carried weight, they carried truth. I would also say this: don't rush the process. Don't despise the quiet seasons. They are doing more than you think. And maybe most importantly, I would say it's okay if your pace doesn't match anyone else's timeline. This podcast doesn't need to explode to matter. It just needed to exist. There were a few conversations that changed me. I already talked about anger, talked about burnout, talked about people pleasing, but I just want to focus on a few of them. First is anger, what it does and what it reveals. I wasn't ready for how deeply that would hit me. Talking about the root of anger, the exhaustion behind it, the grief underneath it, it helped me recognize my own silence. Resetting for the new year, that episode taught me that we don't always need big goals. Sometimes we just need new rhythms. A reset is sometimes just rest with intention. Then gratitude, the gentle transformer. This episode, as I mentioned to this day, changed my posture because I remember recording it and feeling something shift, because gratitude doesn't erase pain, but it softens it, right? And the one on gratitude is where I realized that thankfulness isn't pretending things are perfect. It's choosing to notice what is still good. In speaking to you all this while, I learned to listen to myself. So why does this podcast matter 3 years later? Because voices like yours and mine, they matter. Because conversations, quiet ones, raw ones, hard ones, they create room for healing. Because someone out there is where I was 3 years ago, unsure, afraid, overthinking. And this podcast is for her, for him, for you, for us. As I would say, the world doesn't need louder voices. It needs truer ones. And as I end this year, and as Random Talk with Angie turns 3, I don't have loud promises or dramatic announcements. What I do have is gratitude for growth, for lessons, for listeners, for staying. I may not always know where I'm going, but I know I'm not done. I also know that I'll keep showing up with heart, with honesty, and with hope. And if you're still listening now, thank you. Thank you for staying. Please share this episode with someone who is trying to stay consistent, someone who is growing quietly, someone who needs to know they are not alone. And if this podcast has ever helped you, my DMs are open. My inbox is open. I would love to hear what episode touched you most. Thank you for listening. Thank you for growing with me. Thank you for being part of this journey. And here's to more honest conversations, more presence, more meaning, and most of all, here is to still being here. Here's to another year of random, real, restorative conversations. Happy anniversary to us. This is Random Talk with Angie. I'll see you again soon.